Get 6 months of local news for just $2. You get unlimited access to the news and information you need to stay connected to your community. Visit inforum.com/subscribe to get 6 months of local news for just $2.
You're listening to Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. I'm your host, Rob Port. If I sound distracted, it's because I've been busy covering this story all morning. I'm joined by my co-host, Chad Oban.
He's right of center, I'm left of center, both sides of the political spectrum.
I think it's cathartic. I think it's a necessary and proper debate. I'm glad we're having it.
And honestly, we have to do better.
Okay, I don't know why I'm getting blamed for this, right? Welcome to Plain Talk, where we're going to kick off Friday's episode talking about agriculture, which is on the minds of a lot of people right now. Trade uncertainty is impacting crop prices, and not just. And by the way, not just impacting crop prices, but remember, farmers buy a lot of equipment and a lot of supplies, and a lot of those things are made with steel and things that get imported. So when we slap tariffs on those, the farmers end up paying those as well. So it's not just crop prices, it's also the input prices, all that equipment, all the supplies and things you got to buy to have a successful season and to farm successfully. The price of all that is going up as well. And also we have some odd things going on. The President of the United States, wanting to bring in beef from Argentina. That's upset a lot of people who own livestock and who ranch, who are not not keen to that sort of competition, or why, at a time when they're hurting, we would be bringing in that beef. Now, one of North Dakota's most important agricultural groups is the North Dakota Farm Bureau. And the Farm Bureau is holding an election for new leadership. Current President Darrell Lees is not seeking re-election. Val Wagner is our guest today. She has served on the State and National Farm Bureau Promotion and Education Committee, as well as the Young Farmer and Rancher Committee. She was raised in agriculture from a rural community. She brings direct farm and ranch experience. Her and her husband are currently ranching. She grew up in the Forbes, Ellendale area. And she was elected to the District 3 Board of Directors of the North Dakota Farm Bureau in 2020. She was elected as vice president in 2023. And now she's seeking the presidency. Val, how are you?
Great. How are you this morning?
What's your pitch? I'm doing good. First of all, thanks for asking. And second of all, what's your pitch, to North Dakota's farmers and ranchers, for your leadership? I mean, what are their concerns right now, and how do you hope to advocate for them?
Oh, there are a lot of concerns from A to Z. There are a lot of different things that we're facing in agriculture these days. But more importantly, I think it's great and important for the leadership of the North Dakota Farm Bureau to actually have ag experience, and to be actively engaged in farming and ranching. And so that's my pitch is for someone who has, day-to-day experience and those decisions that need to be made on the farm and the impact that it has, that's the person who is assisting with leading what I would say is the best general farm organization in the state of North Dakota. I have a lot of experience in different leadership roles and different volunteer activities involved in my community. But most importantly, I just want people to be heard, and I want the meetings that we have and the organization to be better at the end of the day.
So, Val, one of the things that you sent us in terms of your platform statement, it was a desire for Farm Bureau to be at the table, listen to people, all that type of thing. Rob referenced North Dakota Farm Bureau as being one of the largest ag groups, maybe the biggest ag group in the state. But, from sort of somebody who's not from agriculture, but engages in a lot of coalition work, that type of thing, it feels to me like North Dakota Farm Bureau over the last several years has become sort of an ideological organization. Like, I'll give you an example. Last election, when the property tax measure was on the ballot, while grain growers, farmers union, soybean growers, stockmen were all opposed to that, Farm Bureau was basically the only group in the whole state, no matter energy, agriculture, whatever, that was supporting that. And I will tell you, when that happened, there was a lot of like, of course, that's what Farm Bureau does. I mean, they're sort of seen as maybe a little bit more out of the mainstream these days. How do you fix that perception, sort of Farm Bureau sort of being solely owned by an ideological fringe?
Well, I think a lot of what we have to do is make sure that our membership is engaged. Uh, and so when we're having those conversations, when state leadership is having those conversations, that everybody is represented there and all viewpoints are represented, not just the loudest ones. Because at the end of the day, the best thing that Farm Bureau has for it is our grassroots involvement in how the policies that we pass are grassroots driven. And so we really need to get back to making sure our members feel heard and understand that when they're engaged at the local level, that does reflect at our state level as well. I really think that's our biggest thing, is that we need to re-engage those members that we have started to not hear from, because they feel like sometimes the fringe is getting more attention than they are. But again, because it is grassroots driven, we need to have our members engaged and involved.
What are some of the biggest priorities? Like, I mean, obviously you're running for this. And the Farm Bureau, I got to think there's two arenas. I mean, the one is obviously state level policy, and then the other is federal policy, where you spend a lot of time talking to our federal delegation, our two senators, and our member of the House of Representatives. So in each of those arenas, like, what's the number one issue that if you're the president, you're charting the course, what are you focusing on?
Well, the best part is, as president of the organization, it's not what I focus on. It's what our members determine our organization should focus on. And that'll be determined in November when we have our meeting. Those discussions happen with all of our delegates present, and then we set forth what our priority issues are at that point. There are several different things that is facing agriculture today that I think, we would be looking at, taking action on. But I think, especially in the state of North Dakota, one of the biggest things that we need to focus on is bridging that gap between agriculture and those that have been elected to serve. Because I think what we've seen, especially in Bismarck and our local areas, is that there is a disconnect to agriculture, and we need to make those connections again and reconnect and make sure that people understand not only where their food comes from, but how the decisions that they make impact what our day-to-day activities are. That, to me, is one of the biggest things that we need to focus on.
Val, one of the things that Rob alluded to earlier was your family has a cattle ranch. And as somebody who really likes to eat beef, I'd like to say thank you for that.
Thank you for your service.
Yes, thank you for your service to our country. I also want to know where my beef is coming from. And so I'm a supporter of country of origin label. I've been reading some of the concerns about the president's comments about bringing in Argentinian beef. I think Representative Dawson Hawley went viral talking about how we should be supporting our farmers and ranchers here. So you become the head of this large farm organization. How do you handle issues when the president of the United States, who I assume the vast majority of your members support, says things like that potentially hurt your industry? How do you handle, because this won't be the last time. So how do you handle that?
I think communication is key. The same thing happened several years ago when Waters of the U.S. and EPA, we were looking at different things, different rules that were coming down that would impact our farm personally. I personally wrote to our administration at the time and, stated how the current ruling at that time, how it would impact my farm. And actually was contacted by the White House staff and had a communication with them regarding, living in the prairie pothole region, what that means for us and how it's not just some, obscure rule, how it would impact my farm directly. And so then I was able to actually have communication and interaction. And I'm not saying that that impacted how things turned out, but I think that communication is key. We need to make sure that we're being heard and that they understand the impact of those decisions that are being made. Um, but there's so many different uh, levels to that in different areas that we look at. I'm also a school board member, so I do understand the importance of having affordable food available, especially at in large quantities. So I understand what that looks like as well. As a mom of four boys, I'd like to say we raise beef because we just enjoy it. But it's great to be able to raise my family on what we're growing as well, and we go through a lot of it. So I understand the problems that we see at the grocery store. But those
If you have four boys, food prices are very important.
Sure, for sure. And, staying within a budget. I understand all of that part of it. So we really need to have those conversations about what those impacts are, those things that sound really good on paper, that makes it seem like, oh, here's an easy solution. It's never that way. And so I definitely think that that is one of the things that we're missing. It's just that sitting at the table and having those conversations.
One thing I think that kind of gets lost is there's two sort of categories of politics. There's partisan politics, which is a lot about candidates and campaigns winning elections. And then there's issue politics, which is about I represent an interest group. Maybe I represent dentists or I represent plumbers or something like that. You represent farmers and ranchers, people involved in agriculture. And so I think it sometimes gets hard because and Chad also works for a group that teachers and educators and public workers that their issue is not partisan, it's representing that group of people. So I think it's hard because our partisan politics have become so overweening, it bleeds over into where there becomes an expectation that groups maintain like an issue group maintains partisan loyalty. Is it difficult to navigate at times? Because I mean, listen, I think we can all agree no politician, no political party has a monopoly on all the good ideas. Sometimes they promote things that are bad ideas, or sometimes just ideas that are good for one group of people but bad for another group of people. And that's hard. And I'm not saying there's anything necessarily wrong with that. It's just reality. But is it hard to navigate those partisan waters right now where there's a lot of people kind of expect that there has to be this constant loyalty to a particular party or a particular candidate?
I agree. And especially, so my oldest son is 23 and my youngest son is 16. So trying to kind of assist them with navigating what political waters look like and how to make decisions and how to discern things on their own and to make sure that they understand that it's more about values and choices and who people are as a person, not just, the letter behind their name. Especially in a state like North Dakota, where it appears that your greatest opportunity or chance of winning is if you run as a Republican, no matter what you stand for. Um, I think it's difficult, especially in an organization that is nonpartisan, whose decisions all seem to be very partisan, because of where our membership lies, and those are some of our core beliefs. Talking about being conservative and different things like that. But yet, at the end of the day, it's again to go back to that. It's about the conversation and listening to our membership and deciding after they decide what our priorities are, making sure that those become, the priorities of the organization and it doesn't become driven by just one mindset.
Val, this is sort of an off the wall question, but I'm curious about it. How does North Dakota Farm Bureau and NODAC are they completely separate organizations, or is there some overlap between the insurance side and the advocacy side?
No, they are completely separate organizations. They have two completely separate boards. They are not, I would say that they have a relationship because they used to be housed more closely together. But that is no longer the case. And so that is, there are completely separate entities. In order to have NODAC insurance at this point, you do have to be a Farm Bureau member. That is one of the member benefits. But that's about where the relationship ends.
So one other question, a process question. You said is the election in November?
November
And-
21st and 22nd is our state annual meeting.
And who votes on that? Who comes to the convention?
Anyone is invited to attend the convention. Those who vote would be delegates that are selected by our county leaders. So each county, based on membership, has a number of delegates that they can send. And so those are the people who are eligible to vote.
So not unlike a party convention. Well, that's really interesting. Now, your opponent is Lucas Lang. And early on, you said it was important for the people leading the Farm Bureau to have actual farming experience. Tell us about, is he somebody with actual farming experience, or is that, I took it as maybe you were saying that he didn't. I don't know Mr. Lang, so I don't know.
No, Lucas is an upstanding guy and
Sure.
has farming and ranching, with animals and agriculture experience. Just saying that as a leader of a farm organization, I think it's important that is a focus.
Sorry, and I didn't mean to suggest that you were directing that at him. I was just making it clear, what you were saying there. Contrast yourself. Obviously you're running for this. You're running against him. You're saying me, not him. So contrast yourself with him. What would be your different leadership style, as composed if the membership chose him instead?
All I always say is that I feel like I am more of I prefer to sit at a table and listen and have conversations and engage that way. I feel comfortable talking to anyone on, any subject, as far as, whether or not I agree with you. Feeling like we can, at the end of the day, if we need to agree to disagree, we agree to disagree. He is very, Lucas is very much so, in his beliefs and he's a great member of Farm Bureau. But I feel like I have an ability to connect and communicate with other organizations, and I have a lot of connections, not only within our state, but in other states too. So you talk about when we get to American Farm Bureau and going to the national level, having served on 2 different national committees, I've been able to make a lot of connections across our country with other state Farm Bureau presidents and other state Farm Bureau leaders, which just gives us an ability to have more conversations to make sure North Dakota is heard on a bigger scale.
Val, one of the things we seem to be talking about on this podcast a lot is the price of health insurance these days. And obviously the members of Farm Bureau don't have the luxury of getting their health insurance often through their employer unless they have a spouse who works off the farm and that kind of thing. The insurance commissioner expressed some concern about if the ACA subsidies go away, that's going to lead to more expensive health insurance. Farmers and ranchers are the biggest users of those subsidies. Are you hearing a lot as you're going out to county conventions, concerns about how farmers and ranchers are going to pay for health insurance moving forward? Is that like a big concern?
It's always a big concern, because like you stated, we don't generally have that luxury of being able to fall back, being self-employed. We have to come up with our own plans or different things like that. Now, one of the things that Farm Bureau has been working very hard on and we were able to accomplish in the last year or so here is we do have a health plan available to our members. Of course, it's not considered an insurance, but it is a health plan. And so we do encourage our members to check that out and see if they're eligible and try to provide them that type of relief as well. We're continually looking for ways that we can reach out to our members and provide them additional support. But But yeah, health insurance is a huge thing that I think um, farmers and ranchers are always concerned about. And I know, for many years, my husband included, before we were married, just figured I think, health insurance plan was to cross his fingers and hope nothing happened. But as you have your families and trying to make sure that you're making decisions that's best for them, and realizing just how quickly things can change, um, without, without even intention. A couple years ago, our second son was in a car accident. He ended up getting flown to Sioux Falls. Thankfully, everything is okay, and he recovered. But without health insurance, that would have been, you know, it would have probably changed our farm story. So, and again, those are conversations that need to happen so that people understand the impact that it has on day to day life. We're not just talking about generalities and pie in the sky things. These are actual impacts on farm and ranch families.
Talk a little bit too about, one area where is in building pipelines. And not just pipelines. I mean, I think pipelines grab a lot of the attention, Summit Pipeline, oil pipelines and that, but also transmission lines. This is always a tricky business because on one hand, we need that infrastructure. On the other hand, we also have to protect property rights along the way. So this has been a difficult thing. And I think some companies have handled it better than others. Summit has gotten a lot of attention. I think you could arguably say that they did not handle their relationships with landowners very well early on in the process. But, from the Farm Bureau's perspective, how does that, obviously you are people that make your living from the land. It's the land is not just this aesthetic thing, this, nice landscapes as we drive by, on the highway. It is, or we enjoy hunting on or what have you. It is the way you make your living. You want to protect it, not just for yourselves, but for future generations. So talk about that a little bit and that, ongoing debate between, the people that want to build this infrastructure and the people that own the land it's to be built on.
And that's a tough one too, because when you're talking about private property rights, which is, one of the things that Farm Bureau, one of our founding beliefs is private property rights. And private property rights go both ways. So that means for someone to be upset about how their neighbor, what easements they give or whatever it may be, and someone who's upset whether or not that's even available to them or not. And so it's really difficult. One of the reasons why, Farm Bureau, we're as a state, we have kind of stayed out of that conversation is because it does go both ways. You should have the right to decide what it is you want to do with your land. And if that includes an easement, you have that ability. You should have that ability. And someone should not be able to stop that from occurring just because they don't like the idea of it. And so, it is difficult sometimes, though, when you're having those conversations, because we're not just talking about, brick and mortar and this is just my business I go to day to day. These are legacies that are built and landscapes that people are familiar with and grew up around. And I hear a lot about how this is, isn't what grandpa had intended and different things like that. And although I agree that it is important that we value our landscape and what it looks like, there are a lot of other places where we appreciate technology. And so we also have to acknowledge that as time moves forward and as technology improves and different things like that. I mean, there was a time when people, didn't want to see power lines to houses. And now everybody, who doesn't have power to their house, everybody does. So we just have to be really kind of careful with those conversations, ensuring that when you're trying to ensure you have your private property rights, that you're not infringing on someone else's.
Val, how can farmers and ranchers do a better job of telling the story to consumers about where their food comes from? I mean, we always joke, you ask a kid, where's your food come from? And they say grocery store, right? I think there is that that gap of knowledge is widening probably. And now I feel like an old guy, sort of thing. But I do feel like we're missing.
You don't just feel like one. You look like one.
This is 2 straight episodes when we're taking some shots at my age. I can take it though. But how do we tell that story better to make sure folks understand that this food doesn't just show up at the grocery store, but somebody's growing it, somebody's butchering it, all that kind of stuff?
I think it's important just to have conversations. It's not about, you don't go into it just trying to educate someone about, you need to know this or you need to know that. You need to be able to just answer questions. Now, I will say, when I was a young mom, like I thought I knew everything and I thought I had all of the answers about, why people should decide where to buy food from and why this is the best and that is the best. And then I think God kind of played a little joke on me, and he gave me my youngest child had some food issues when he was born, and he had to limit the amount of protein he could consume so that he could stay healthy. And when you're a beef farmer and your kid's not supposed to eat hamburger, it kind of makes you question a lot of things. But as I saw him thrive when he changed his diet a little bit, and now he's able to basically consume whatever he wants, I realized that people made decisions at the grocery store based on information I didn't have. So I was judging them based on the decisions they were making without having any context at all as to why. And so I think if we had our conversations before just jumping the gun and judging people on why they're making their decisions that they make, we would find ourselves in a lot better place. And so I personally just feel like the best way to have people understand where their food comes from and for them to care about where their food comes from is to talk to them about it, and for that to have a relationship with them so that they understand this isn't just, some, name on a box somewhere, that it really is a family that's behind all of this. And what that looks like for each person is a little different. But without those conversations, I think we end up in a world of hurt. And if we had just more conversations about it, I think people would be willing to talk more and understand more.
Val, thanks for your time and good luck next month.
Yes.
Thanks, Val.
Thanks so much. Thank you, guys.
Hey, Plain Talk listeners, have something to say? Call or text Plain Talk with your questions, comments, or headlines you want us to cover.
Just dial 701-587-3141. Leave us your message or shoot us a text with your name and location, and you could be featured on an upcoming show.
Hi, my name is Ashley, and I am in Jamestown.
Hey, Rob and Chad. My name's Tony. I live in Grand Forks.
That's 701-587-3141.
Call us, text us, vent, praise.
We want you in the conversation. Thanks for being part of the show.
Now let's get back to today's episode.
Welcome back. Just finished up with Val Wagner, who is running to be the president of the North Dakota Farm Bureau. I mean, I had her on because I think that people don't pay a lot of attention to those. The Farm Bureau is a very important group in state politics, and they have a hugely important constituency. As does the Farmers Union, obviously, as well. But I think those groups are kind of in an interesting place. When we talk about like how hyper partisan this era is, those groups are in a very interesting position because a lot of times their membership has, like when you're talking about farmers and ranchers, we can guess who most of them voted for.
Right.
So that's, it puts them in an interesting position. I think maybe a better example, what I'm talking about is like what the NRA did to itself when it's sort of like the NRA existed to advocate for gun rights. But what the NRA allowed itself to do is it kind of morphed into an arm of the Republican Party and isolated itself from people who weren't Republicans, but might have been supportive to them on issues important to them. Like the partisanship became more important than the policy. And I think that can happen to a lot of these groups. I think a criticism, maybe you and I haven't really talked about it, but maybe a criticism you and I share of the Farm Bureau under the previous President Darrell Lees is that they were kind of falling into that trap for a while.
Yeah, and not just of being Republican. I think of being a certain type of Republican, right?
Well, in North Dakota, that's really the divide. It's
Well,
what flavor of Republican are you these days?
yeah, I think it's really interesting thinking about those two major farm groups, though. Both of them are in the process of electing new leaders, replacing longtime leaders. Mark Watney at Farmers Union, where Matt Perdue, and there's another candidate running for Farmers Union. And then obviously Darrell Lease leaving Farm Bureau. I think both of those ag groups are interesting. I feel like Farm Bureau has pushed further to the right, and ideologically, and Farmers Union has been trying to be less partisan, less ideological, and part of that is the reality of what's happening in the state, right? I think it's led to Farmers Union being more effective at the Capitol than Farm Bureau, which is crazy, with a legislature that is this Republican, that the quote progressive farm group, which I don't think is the case, is much more effective than the conservative one. And I think Farm Bureau over the last several years has become less relevant in mainstream politics than they ever have been before.
I don't like the genre of social media content that's like the man on the street interviews, because I think they're always edited to make a certain group look stupid or whatever. But one thing that interests me and that I think is true is that when you sit down and you talk about a platform of policy ideas, but you don't tie it to a party or an ideology or a candidate or elected leader, you just talk about the ideas, you find that people's views are a lot more nuanced.
Right.
And I think that's so interesting, because people have a reaction where if you tell them that it's a democratic idea, they might just dismiss it without thinking of it. But if you just present it to them as an idea, then you have a lot better chance of getting through. And I think getting back to what I've been talking about is these groups, the Farm Bureau's job is to advocate for farmers and ranchers. That's their job. So I don't know. I think it's really problematic, the path that they're on. And listen, given how important agriculture is to our state, I want them to do well. I want Farmers Union to be successful. I want the Farm Bureau to be successful, and that means strong leadership. So, these elections, Farm Bureau and we've had them both on, or at least one candidate from each race on. I think they're really important.
Well, Rob, I think thinking about that sort of the partisan piece of this, I mean, we could have spent that whole interview with Val just saying, federal Republicans have done this, which is terrible for North Dakota agriculture. How do you feel about that? Tariffs, the beef issue that the president is pushing, health insurance, and some of the subsidy piece. I mean, those things are direct negative impacts on farmers and ranchers in North Dakota. But I'm guessing 90% of Farm Bureau members still support the president, right? And I think that's to your point, that even when we had Judy Estenson on talking about how 30% of family farmers might be going under because of tariffs and other things. And it was like, yeah, but we still support the president. What is that? What's that logjam? How do you break that logjam of sort of, this thing is affecting my bottom line, this is affecting my family in a negative way, to jump out of that partisan sort of feeling?
Well, I think that's the struggle. And that's what I was trying to get at,
right.
When I asked her that question, is how do you sort of navigate these expectations of partisan loyalty when the policy is just bad policy?
Right.
And I honestly, I think not so long ago, when you look at where Val is from, she's from the Forbes, Ellendale area. That's one of those rural eastern counties that not very long ago, and I would have to look at that county specifically, but a lot of those rural eastern counties were a power base for North Dakota Democrats. When you look at when Heidi Heitkamp won in 2012, a lot of those counties were blue. When she lost in 2018, they had flipped to red. So I think that was a product of a lot of North Dakota farmers doing that calculation, saying Democratic majorities in Washington, D.C. aren't so good for our bottom line. Is there a point at which a lot of those farmers have to do the same reflection and say these trade wars, the tariffs, everything else that's President Trump's bizarre fascination with propping up the regime in Argentina? At what point are those things just bad for my bottom line? I got to change the way I'm voting.
Yeah, and I mean, you talk about the area where Val is from. I'm guessing the vast majority of our lives, that area was represented by Democrat. I mean, you're absolutely right. That was Jerry Kelch. That was, I think, Joel Heitkamp went over there far enough. I mean, it was a blue area, which is not even close to winnable anymore for Democrats because of this sort of rural white voters.
Yeah, I mean, the last time was 2012. I would have to look, but I'd be willing to guess that county, Ellendale Forbes, probably voted blue in 2012.
Yeah, I mean, it's Pam Gollison's territory. It's Bill Ammerman. I can go through all the legislators from down there that have been really, really effective legislators for their district. But at some point, those constituents decided the Democrat brand and whatever's happening in Washington is too much. And it's not going to happen fast where people are going to turn against the president. But if farms start failing, people start losing their third, fourth generation farm because of some of these things.
You can't enjoy, at that point, you can't afford to indulge the team sports aspect of it anymore.
Right on.
Yeah.
Right on.
You can't afford to because you're going broke. You're going out of business, or your kid's going without health care, or whatever.
They can't afford her meds.
Right. Whatever the challenge is, there's a point at which this is hurting me and I can't afford to be hurt, and I'm going to have to change the way I'm voting, which I am hoping. I hate it. I hate saying it because it's so, maybe cynical is not the right, but it's so dark. But it feels like that's what it's going to take to sort of break Americans, right and left, frankly, out of this just absolute partisan loyalty, and have to remember that democracy functions when people are willing to change their minds.
Yeah. And again, I think that when we talk about the government shutdown, it's the same sort of situation. We need people to feel real pain before I think either party is going to move to open the government. And so far, people are not feeling the pain. They will in a few short weeks.
Well, this is a perfect segue for what we wanted to talk about, North Dakota versus South Dakota. I had a column about this.
North Dakota's better. Is that, no, that's not what we're debating? Okay.
South Dakota is a great place in many ways with great people, but their politics, and the thing is superficially, their politics look nearly identical, right? Republicans just dominate every statewide office, dominant majorities in the legislature. If anything, South Dakota even more so than in North Dakota. But one thing that has happened in South Dakota that hasn't happened in North Dakota is that there has been a takeover of sort of very populist Republicans who have been very successful in winning seats in the legislature, who control their state party. Up here in North Dakota, that hasn't happened. Now, the populists do control the state party in North Dakota, but it's not clear that that's really given them any muscle. I feel like this upcoming election cycle is going to be a key one to determine sort of what path North Dakota is going to take in the future. But an interesting anecdote to me was there's a jet fuel, sustainable jet fuel company. They'll make jet fuel out of ethanol, basically. I don't know a whole lot about their business, but it's a multi-billion-dollar investment. They were going to make it in South Dakota. Now they're making it in North Dakota. And along the way, the CEO of the company said they had to leave South Dakota. The politics were intransigent. I think his direct quote was, "North Dakota is a breath of fresh air." And I think the difference is because North Dakota is still governed by pretty pragmatic Republicans who are not ideologues, who at the end of the day are just pro-business, pro-getting things done. And that is the difference between South Dakota and North Dakota. So that is a way, I feel like it's an illustration of what we're talking about, where you indulge these intransigent, ideological, hyper-partisan politics, and it ends up hurting you. Well, that just hurt South Dakota to the tune of a, 2 point whatever billion dollar project that's now going to be happening in North Dakota.
In the summer of 2024, while you and I were talking about how the normie Republicans had maintained control in North Dakota in that primary, our colleagues in South Dakota were having conversations about, oh no, the far right just took over all these seats, primarily around Summit, right? I mean, primarily around the pipeline, and that was the real driver. And what you had is traditional Republicans who were willing to work with people to advocate for their communities that were gone. I mean, in like leaders, like the Speaker of the House, leaders in both caucuses were gone. And I think one of the points of your column is that could happen here.
Yeah.
It could very easily happen here. And I got to be honest, I've been spending a lot of time thinking about June of 2026. I think there's 14 or 15 districts where there's traditional normal Republicans at least one, between 1 and 3 in those districts that may be challenged from the right. And so it's not that hard to imagine 10 of those districts go the wrong way. And the Republican Party in North Dakota, the state party's already gone, but the North Dakota legislature is all of a sudden controlled by that sort of populist far right wing.
I could tell you they're talking about that. I was assured by one lawmaker in a normie district, who, by the way, was challenged from the far right in the last election cycle and survived it. They're assuring me that, they're recruiting candidates, the strongest candidate recruitment they've seen in a long time. I know the governor I'm assuming the talk is that the governor is, maybe going to get involved in supporting some candidates down the ballot, although that's a little touchy when you don't want the executive branch picking legislative candidates. It's one thing for a governor to support the candidates, another one for the governor to pick them. But that is it consequential election that's going to come up, and particularly the June primary election. This is an inflection point for our state. Last June could have been an inflection point for our state. The normies held on. Brandon Pritchard ran a slate of 18 candidates. Almost all of them failed. And in fact, I think the 4 that won were already incumbents. So,
right. But normies didn't expand either.
They didn't expand either. They held the ground. Can they hold the line again? And what's the critical mass? How many seats can they lose before, that populist wing can really throw its weight around in Bismarck? There's a little bit of a buffer with the Democrats, but each as the closer that divide gets to half and half in the Republican caucus, you're empowering the Democratic caucus to get more of what they want. And then the moderate Republicans have to be careful about, conceding ground to the Democratic caucus too much, because that just ends up costing more of them their seats, maybe, if this continues. And that's really the question is, what do North Dakota voters want? Do you want to be South Dakota? A place where, to believe the CEO of this company that wants to build a multi-billion-dollar jet fuel, he says you can't do business in South Dakota these days. Now, I'm sure that's probably some hyperbole. I'm sure there's plenty of people that can do business in South Dakota, but it's like, right. They're missing a pragmatism back there. And again, I would argue a pragmatism that is central to the success of North Dakota Republicans. They didn't get there. I remember all the years Democrats complaining about John Hoeven stealing their ideas and stuff. Yeah, it's pragmatism. When Democrats had a good idea, Republicans were afraid to grab onto it and take credit for it. And, maybe you can be critical of them for that. But at the end of the day,
that used to piss me off, Rob, in my previous professional life.
But from a good government perspective, it's like they were just grabbing what worked. This will work. We think this is a good idea, and we don't care who came up with it. There is some virtue to that. And, that's missing in South Dakota. Does North Dakota want to go down that road? There's a lot of people that do, because they're caught up in this partisan ideological fog, and I don't know when it's going to clear.
So part of me is, or not part of me, all of me is really happy to hear that that you've heard from a normie Republican who said their candidate recruitment is going well, because I am nervous about that. Engaging in district conventions and in internal Republican politics is not a fun thing right now. We used to have a time where you'd have candidates would be getting recruited by the Democrats and Republicans to run for an office just because they were a good community member and they weren't really identified ideologically. I don't know that you have that anymore, just because so few seats are competitive from a partisan point of view. But I worry that a lot of those people are like, I don't want to engage in partisan politics. I will be honest, I'm intrigued by the idea of a rise of independent candidates. I don't know if it's going to happen in the next, couple cycles, but we're seeing in places like Alaska where independent candidates are competing and they're winning, and they have caucuses of normal Republicans, independents, and Democrats that are the governing majority. That's intriguing to me.
I think the thing about independents is, if you see a real rise where they get some traction, it's going to last for a cycle, maybe two. At which point the fever breaks, whatever party, what the parties adjust, and then the independents get reabsorbed is typically what happens.
I think the only way it works is if they're real independents too. You can't have somebody. I think there's somebody running for the U.S. Senate in South Dakota right now who ran as a Democrat for the U.S. Senate and now is running as an independent. It's like, yeah, it doesn't work that way.
I hear that like people say, oh, Carl Munn should just run as an independent. Well, she's run as a Republican twice now, and then ran, with all this backing from. I mean, someone like that, it's like they're defined now.
Right.
It's hard to overcome that to where you're right. They have to feel authentically independent. Not I'm using the independent label as a shield to kind of obscure something about myself that I just, because it's inconvenient to call myself. It's a tough thing.
Yeah, the U.S. Senate candidate in Nebraska in 2024, Osborne, he was a machinist or something like that who truly was nonpartisan, and to the point where the DSCC was told, we don't want anything to do with the Democratic Party, stay away from us. And he came within 2 or 3 points. He's going to run again. And guess what? It's often just you get that one shot. And if you don't win in that one shot, you get baggage and some of that stuff. But I'm intrigued by
it's kind of what I was talking about, where if you divorce the policy ideas from a partisan or ideological label, they become a lot more interesting all of a sudden. Now it's hard because so many policy positions are sort of pigeonholed as Republican or Democratic as well. So
as long as I've been involved in politics, there's been frustration. Why do voters in North Dakota always vote for the progressive side on initiated measures? I mean, often it's the progressive side that wins, because there is that disconnect. Or the city of Bismarck used to have a city commission that was 4 progressives and 1 conservative, while being 80%.
Not that long ago, Minot of all places had multiple progressives on the city council.
Yeah, you remove that D and the R, and people sort of look at the person and look at what they believe in. It's like, oh, I'm open to this person. But when the D and the R is there, it's hard for people to sort of move past that.
And before somebody emails and says, well, we should just get rid of partisan labels, trust me, we will find another way to label people.
Right.
Because that's just what we do. I'm not saying it's good. You're just not getting away from it. So,
listen, I'm for nonpartisan legislative races, and let's go unicameral. Let's go full on Nebraska here,
Great.
Even though they still run as progressives or conservatives.
Great. And while you're shouting at clouds, that's just not going to happen.
What do you think that the people who are benefiting from the current system aren't going to change the current system?
I think the voters aren't going to change the current system.
Sure.
I think if you put that on the ballot, I don't think it would pass. I don't think the voters would go for it. And I think you'd probably have a lot of people right and left voting against it. So I don't think it's popular. It's not what the voters want,
Sure.
And what brings me back to my favorite theme is that it's the voters' fault. And they really are getting what they're voting for.
We're back to normalcy again, where you're saying that the voters aren't very smart, and I'm refusing to take the bait on that one. A couple times where I've said it.
It's collectively, like individually, they're smart, but when they act in a herd, they make stupid decisions or want contradictory things. It's a difficult thing. But again, I don't like exonerating the voters from all this and pretending like it's all top down, because it's not. A lot of this really is coming from the bottom up. And they're getting what they want, and it's hurting us. So that's a difficult thing. Let's move on. We actually got a listener text, Ben from Crystal, North Dakota, which I believe is near Hoople, North Dakota. Is that right?
That might be right. I'm just going to say it's right, just because, I mean, the fact that you just worked in Hoople is very impressive.
I love Hoople.
I recently drove through Annetta, North Dakota, the home of the world's largest turkey barbecue.
Oh,
wonderful community. And have you been to the Annetta turkey barbecue?
I have not. No,
I've been twice. It's a sight to see. It's delicious. It's North Dakota to a T. Go to Annetta, to the world's largest turkey barbecue.
I love rural North Dakota so much, and all the little towns and all the little diners. It's special place. Anyway, Ben is from Crystal, North Dakota, and he texted. He's actually talking about an episode that's a ways back, episode 629. It says, "Hi, Rob and Chad. I just listened to episode 629 from a couple of months ago that contained your discussion about what SNAP can and cannot be used on. I agree that it should be slightly restricted. The WIC program already includes a curated list of foods you can have. I don't think it would be too difficult to do kind of the inverse and use a carefully curated list of a few items you can't have. You could borrow language from various soda taxes to decide what defines a pop and do something like 5+ ingredients and the simple sugar content over 50% by volume to rule out basically every candy bar or snack cake or similar junk foods." So what he's talking about is I had written a column saying, it's not unreasonable. North Dakota should seek a waiver. A number of states have under the Trump administration. In fact, we're doing it now in order to, because it was a criteria of getting a whole bunch of extra money from the federal government. So we're going to be bringing our program, our SNAP program, in line with that and kind of ruling out some of the junk foods and pops and candies. And, Chad, when you and I talked about it, I know you're a little suspicious of the impulse. I felt like you and I kind of had a lot of agreement, though, on some of the stuff. I think there's just some things that just obviously should not be part of the SNAP program.
Yeah, my biggest concern with this sort of blanket statement is little Johnny, just because his parents don't make a lot of money, still should get a milkshake. And I know it's the milkshake machine that really set you off on this thing. So I also, you said that North Dakota is going to change its rules on this. I also hate the idea of Robert Kennedy Jr. sort of being the impetus for some of these changes, because he's
I don't like Robert Kennedy either. But again, divorcing the politician and the party from the policy.
Oh, look at you bringing that.
You like that?
Good work.
Sort of my rebuttal to the idea that little Johnny can't get I would remind you of the name of the program, which is the Supplemental Nutrition Program. So the idea is this is supplementing money that little Johnny's parents are already getting, and it's supposed to be make sure that they get nutritious food. So the government's money can be spent on nutritious foods, and then if little Johnny wants a milkshake, his mom and dad can pay for that out of their own money.
I believe there's a former great Yankee who said it's deja vu all over again, having this conversation from several months ago. I think we're both making the same points, but I think the texter's point is that this can be implemented. It won't be that complicated. That maybe it's worth a shot. And
I think maybe the texter's mind is also on, because this was just in the news again with again our legislature considering, how we're going to direct this. What's the it's like $500 million, and then I think there's some additional dollars that we can access by aligning our policies with some of this, which is what they're doing. I don't think this is a bad change for SNAP, and I think liberals dying on a hill like this is just bad for them politically. I think most Americans should you be able to use food stamps to buy candy bars? I think most Americans are like, no, of course not. Buy candy bars with your own money.
Right.
I don't think that's an unreasonable position. So, we don't need to litigate that.
So, we can keep talking about this if you want, but I think we're both in the same place. So what do you know about the special session, by the way? I mean, I'm hearing January timeline. Is
January, February? I don't think they have a time, like a specific set of dates set up. A lot of obviously, anytime there's a special session, a lot of concern about keeping the train on the tracks.
Keep it narrow, folks. Keep it narrow.
Keep it narrow focus. Don't try to get cute or try to bring in new issues, because everybody tries to do that. Or not everybody, but a lot of people have, a pet project that maybe got killed in the last session, and they think they can get it snuck in because everyone's in Bismarck for real quick and want to go home again. But my understanding is end of January, early February is what they're aiming for. And then they really want to keep it focused on those new funds and save everything else for the next legislative session after the next election too.
Get into town, spend all those federal dollars, go home, complain about the Fed spending too much money. Got it.
In North Dakota's a little bit unusual, because our legislature only meets officially or for a regular session every 2 years. Yeah. So really, I mean, in some ways, these are a lot of lame duck lawmakers who are going to be meeting in an election year. I'm all for them doing the necessary work, but if we're going to have consequential policy debates, that needs to wait till after this election. North Dakotans are getting ready to elect a new legislature and some new statewides. And let's see what that election before we start getting into some of these debates. So,
and that we need to talk about District 42 at some point as well, because
we have a couple minutes there, because that's so my understanding is they have submitted a number of signatures that, if they're all valid and they pass, and I think the Secretary of State's office has till like November 2nd or 3rd or something like that to verify them. If they're all verified, they're going to force a special election, at which point I think the governor's going to put it on the June primary, which Dustin McNally, who was appointed in District 42, was already going to have to appear on. I don't know what we just accomplished.
So I hope the governor calls the question. I hope he holds a special election, blames it all on Brandon Pritchard for this taxpayer dollar being wasted. This is what Brandon Pritchard and these people who signed this petition wanted. Let's have this election. Let's elect whoever the legislator is from District 42 to fulfill the rest of the term right now. Call the question. Make Brandon justify wasting taxpayer dollars on this.
It's interesting because an analog to that, or something similar, is, remember that special election in Dickinson, where you had everybody on Facebook was hooting and hollering, and they gathered petitions and they recalled a member of the city council to the ballot, and then nobody stepped up to run against him, and they ended up having a special election to where there was no named. Now I think somebody kind of ran a half-hearted write-in campaign, but nobody stepped forward to challenge him. Now in District 42, it's going to be really interesting, because 42 is an interesting district. It's kind of a purplish, even blue district when the UND students are there.
Well, I think it used to be. The last redistricting brought in the Air Force Base and some other stuff. So this district is much redder than it used to be.
Even so.
Yeah.
What you're going to have is McNally, who will appear on the ballot automatically because he's the endorsed candidate by the party. And then you're going to have a challenger from the far right. So we're pretty much guaranteed 2 Republicans, but it's an election. So that means Democrats or Libertarians or anybody or independent candidate, anybody else could run as well. So Democrats are going to put a candidate on the ballot. And then that candidate is going to have, united support from Democrats, and the Republicans are going to be splitting the vote. Now, is District 42 red enough to where 2 Republican candidates can split the vote against one another and still beat a Democrat? I don't know, but you're rolling the dice.
Right. Well, and I'm actually not sure the Air Force Base is in District 42. I don't want to be corrected in real time on this podcast. Okay. It has gotten much more conservative because they expanded beyond that. But I think that is such an interesting thing. But also, on the flip side, you have a Democrat, you have McNally, you have ultra conservative. Do the Democrats and McNally split the normal vote? And then you have the right wing, maybe, because isn't it Doug Ozowski's wife, the current sitting legislator, whose wife is now running or ran for the, like...
She ran for the endorsement. Obviously, we're going to see, once the election gets called, we'll see who is in officially. It'll be McNally and at least 2 other candidates, I got to think. So we'll see who they are. But yeah, I mean, it's the wife of...
It's a crapshoot.
Right.
And I also think I look back at the 2024 elections in the primary where Emily O'Brien won. Nobody voted in District 42. So I don't think you get that many more people to vote if you wait till the June primary. I would rather do it when the UND students are there.
Well, that's
because there'll be higher vote turnout.
That's a good point. It's going to cost the taxpayers more.
Thanks, Brandon.
For what? I mean, again, now I should make this clear. Whoever wins the special election, then they're in. They do not have to appear.
Yep.
They do not then have to run it all in 2026.
Through November of 2028.
But here's the thing. It would have been free in that the taxpayers are already paying for an election in June and November next year because we're obligated to by law. Dustin McNally was already going to have to go through that process and appear on the primary and appear in the general to have his appointment confirmed. If he wins this special, then he's in and he's good. But we're spending money that we didn't need to spend. If you don't like Dustin McNally, challenge him in the June primary next year. You didn't have to hold the special election. So maybe the governor will do that. I guess I hadn't thought about it that way. And the question of the students in District 42, The students and McNally's a professor at UND too. Maybe that helps. I don't know.
And I know we think of like college campuses as being a little bluer. I mean, I think
Our college campuses are pretty red.
Right. I mean, there's 3,000 people who were at the Turning Points event up at UND recently, and a lot of those, I would assume, are college students. So I think it's going to be interesting how the governor handles this if the signatures actually go through. But I don't think
I do think the signatures will probably go through. I don't anticipate, barring something really having gone wrong, I don't anticipate any problems there. I think we're probably going to have this special election. Then the next question becomes, when does the governor call it?
You're going to have the biggest turnout if you do it when the students are still there.
Yeah, for sure. All right, we're going to stop it there. Thank you so much for listening. Appreciate it as always. If you want to leave us a voicemail or send us a text like Ben from Crystal did. By the way, Ben, thanks for weighing in.
Thanks, Ben.
Thanks for listening. If you want to do the same, 701-587-3141. You can call that number and leave a voicemail, or you can just shoot a text. I promise a real person won't answer, so you won't have to interact with another human being. You can just talk to our robot, and then we'll respond on the show. If you want to follow us on social media, YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, X, we're at Plain Talk ND. That's our handle. Thanks for listening. We'll talk again. That's it for today on Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. Plain Talk is a production of Forum Communications Company. Got a question, comment, or suggestion? Leave us a voicemail or send us a text message at 701-587-3141. That's 701-587-3141. If you haven't subscribed to Plain Talk yet, you can find us on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform like Spotify or Apple Podcasts. For those of you who are already hooked, give us a rating or review. And don't forget to share or tell a friend. Special thanks to my co-host Chad Oban, and from myself and everyone at Plain Talk, thanks for listening.
And as somebody who really likes to eat beef, I'd like to say thank you for that.